As it turns out, Jesus made some points now and then that might strike you as disturbing if you only have the do unto others vision of him in your head. Take Matthew 10, where Jesus says, "Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword."
He said what?
Then in Matthew 21, Jesus compares the forthcoming kingdom of God to a building where he is the cornerstone and says, "Anyone who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces. Anyone on whom it falls will be crushed." There's another disturbing New Testament quote from Jesus in Matthew 25. In the parable of the sheep and the goats, he describes the apocalyptic Son of Man turning to a group on his left side, aka the goats, and saying, "Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels." Let's take a look at the Matthew 25 passage with a bit of historical context. First, notice that all the disturbing passages we've mentioned come from the New Testament book of Matthew, including the one about being tossed into eternal fire. Yes, Matthew focuses on the narrative of Jesus' life and death like the other three Gospels, Mark, Luke, and John. But Matthew also paints a picture to present Jesus as a long-prophesied Messiah described in the Bible's Old Testament. This would have been a crucial point for getting local Jews on board with Christianity in its early days. The sheep and goats parable from Matthew 25 illustrates this point perfectly. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats.
And then he'll put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left.
The people on his right side, the sheep, are those who treated him well and thus get rewarded. This is where we get the famous line, "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me."
Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom that has been prepared for you from the foundation of the world.
The people on the left, however, go to the hellfire forever. Such was the king's judgment. In other words, it's a call to action to get Jews on board with the idea that Jesus is the long foretold Messiah they've been waiting for. So you might say to yourself, that's all well and good, but it's certainly not the peace and love I was expecting to hear. There's some modern day breakdowns that try and put the aggressive passage in more relative terms. For example, the NIV Bible focuses on the passage's call for compassion, kindness, love, and family. It describes the goats as pushy and the sheep gentle, and even connects us all to orphan children around the world. This would tie back in a way to the New Testament idea that the world was lost before the Messiah. In this case, Jesus arrived. There's no real discussion, however, of the fate of the goats. Another modern-day explainer from the website Got Questions goes one step further and talks about how the passage seems to describe good works as the way to avoid hellfire, then contrasts that with notions of Christian grace. So their take is that the goats are doomed, literally. Yikes. The apocalypse is a core belief that Christianity inherited from ancient Jews, who were also waiting for the end of days. And these texts tie back into the purpose of Matthew as a book intended to convince folks that Jesus was a messianic figure associated with the apocalypse. In other words, it's not that disturbing once you get it. It's just a specific call to first century Jews to let them know they're gonna burn in hell if they don't get on board with the new Messiah. Okay, maybe it's a bit aggressive, but those were the times.